Hello guys, this is Modest Major here, bringing you some commentary over some Destiny beta gameplay footage. This is on the Xbox One. I had to wait obviously because I didn't have a PS4, so the codes just came out last night and I decided to go pretty much headfirst into it. I reached the level cap, which might sound impressive, but to be quite honest it isn't, because it doesn't take very long at all to reach level 8. Pretty much took me around 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4 at a push, and that's honestly something I hope they rectify in the full release, because honestly Bungie as a company have been really good at incentivizing you to rank up and having this really long, in-depth either ranking system or progression system. In Halo Reach it took like a full year of gameplay to reach Inheritor, and there were a bunch of unlocks and armor customizations along the way, so it'd kind of be foolish of them to leave that behind. I kind of expect they're not going to, but I heard that the max level cap in the actual game is going to be 20, so it'll be interesting to see how that will develop. But I'm sure you guys are kind of itching to hear my opinions on this game, whether or not I like or dislike them. If you heard my pre-expectations of the game, you'll know that I wasn't feeling too optimistic. I was going to reserve judgment, of course. I don't want to be biased, and I want to go into this with this mindset of, oh, this game's actually going to suck. And, to be honest, when I heard that the beta codes had been released, and when I heard people talking about it, I was getting pretty darn excited and hyping up, and I was like, you know what, I am actually going to probably enjoy this game to some extent. And now that I've had some time with it, I can tell you guys. Now, you're going to have to take my opinions with a pinch of salt, of course, because A, this is a beta product, and things are extremely subject to change, especially in an MMO game where there's going to be so much depth. It's going to be all about end game content. It's all going to be about progressing through the game and getting further and seeing, what depth, what's behind the smoke and mirrors, how much, meat is behind this whole product, and that's not really something we can tell through the beta. Honestly, I kind of question just how good an idea this beta was. Obviously I'm glad that they're doing testing for it, but at the same time, I question how much testing is being done because it's so close to the actual release. I believe the game's being released in September, which is 2 months from now, and I don't think this was if this is acting as a pre-release hype game, I don't think it's done a very good job, because all it's done is made me want a taste for more and make me want to see more behind what this actual game represents, because to be honest, in quite a lot of ways it feels like there's just some stuff missing, and it feels like there's a little bit more I wanted out of this product, to be quite honest, especially as they talk about the fact that it's been made for 10 years. They've been hyping up how many people they've got working in it, how much money they've poured into the game. There's just a couple of things that I don't necessarily enjoy and haven't really taken my fancy. And I played Borderlands, I played RPGs in the past, I played Halo in the past, I played sci-fi shooters. I've got a pretty good understanding of what I wanted from this game and what this game would take to become a fully fledged, really solid release. I mean, in a lot of ways it is a solid release, and I'll start off by going into the positives of what I think works in this game to an extent. And the first of all is the UI, the user interface is probably the most striking thing about the game. The way the menus work, the way the integration works, the way you travel from planet to planet. In my eyes, it's a pretty darn seamless experience. I think the menus are probably some of the best I've seen in a game, and I know this is something quite small, and some of you guys might not even care, but truly, I just go through the skill trees, and the way you navigate from, option to option is just, it's perfect, it's fluid, and I've missed stuff like this, because with a game let's say, for example, Halo 4, you got really, really bad menus in it, and it was something I missed about Bungie and the way they created their games, is that it makes the platform seem like something you don't want to get off, because everything's just so connected. You've constantly got something fun to do. You constantly got something, awaiting behind each door, and that's kind of what it feels like when you're on the actual menus. The game itself looks absolutely stunning. I love the way that the universe is created. I love the atmosphere to the game. I just think it looks goddamn pretty. I don't think there's any other way of saying it. I really I just appreciate the amount of detail that has gone into every single little corner, every single nook and cranny, the way that the races look, the way that the races act, the animations, etc. It's goddamn beautiful. It's going to be probably the first thing you notice, and that appeal isn't going to really wear off anytime soon. And I'm super excited to see the other worlds they've created. One of the small little problems I have with this game, just in the beta build, is that the area can get a little bit repetitive in the look of it, and that's fine as long as the actual full release you know, varies that up, I suppose. I want to see stuff like, I want to see ice worlds, I want to see fire worlds, I want to see volcano worlds, I want to see, you know, really extreme terrains, and that's one of these problems that keeps cropping up when I try to dissect Destiny, when I try to think about Destiny. I'm like, oh, you know, what if this isn't in the game, and you don't know, and there's this great sense of mystery of like, is the game gonna have everything I want it to? Because this beta is just a taste, it's just a small portion, and you don't know what the rest of the game is going to add up to. So there's a lot of mystery there, and it kind of frustrates me, because I always just want to go headfirst into it. I want to work out what's going on. But, you know, in terms of the actual game mechanics, I'm going to go over some of the things that frustrates me following the way that the game looks. And one of the main things so far is that the way that equipment works, the way that you pick up equipment, and the way that you get equipment. Now, to me, it kind of feels like on every single level, at the most, you're going to see maybe one treasure chest. Maybe one. And a lot of times I open these treasure chests and there's just Destiny coins in them. I call them Destiny coins because I can never remember the actual name. I think it's glitter. And you see glitter, and glitter can be spent on stuff. Now, maybe you'll get that, and it will probably only be a very small amount. The actual bad guys themselves, you see all that gear on the floor right there in front of me. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be actual gear. In fact, it never means that it's going to be gear. I don't know why I even said that. It's going to be potentially, you know, ammo for your weapons. It's going to be charge for your supernova or your super ability. And I'm sure you guys have seen that in YouTube videos. You have one of 3 super abilities. With the Warlock, you have something called a Nova Bomb, where you go into the air and you throw this massive force grenade, and it's really, really good, a strong area of effect damage. And then you get stuff like the Titan, who has this massive punch ability, which feels extremely satisfying to go into a group. You know, everything feels like it connects really well, and you get the amount of satisfaction that you'd want. The disadvantage of that, potentially, is that, A, there's only 3 classes as of right now. I haven't looked into Destiny enough to know if there's going to be more classes, to be quite honest with you guys. And in terms of the Warlock, the Titan, and the Hunter, you only get 1 ability per class. Now, there's ways of, like, upgrading them in the future, but unfortunately they weren't able to be seen during the beta, which is pretty depressing. So, once again, got to reserve my judgment in that field. But I just worry about the repetitious nature of the abilities, because it might have that sort of Titanfall vibe when you use it once and it feels really satisfying and you just want to, like, you know, go into a group of enemies and just bash them around the faces. But I worry about, like, you know, is that going to last a long time? Is that going to get a little bit repetitive? In terms of the Hunter's ability, when I get this golden pistol that can one-hit kill enemies, it was fun at first, but then I start, you know, the satisfaction starts wearing off after a little bit, to be quite honest. But going backwards, because I pretty much glazed over my previous topic, when it comes to the actual weapons, okay, A, the weapon variety is not as strong as I'd want it to be. There's a lot of assault rifles. You'll see the titles of these weapons being called, like, Pulse Rifle, GR Rifle, and they've got all these different varying names, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to pick this up. Is this going to be like an electroshock rifle? Is this going to be like a fire rifle? Is it going to be incendiary? Is it going to explode when it touches someone? And a lot of the times, it's just a carbine with an ADS, you know, like an ADS scope, I should say, and it's just kind of frustrating because you want something a little bit different. And don't get me wrong, you do see them occasionally, and when they do work, they work amazingly. I just wish they'd gone a little bit more outside of the box in that respect. I don't want to use a, like, Call of Duty based real life weapon, especially as this is a sci-fi universe, especially as you want everything to pop. You want to be able to play this game for a long time. You don't really want to be using the more repetitive machine gun like weapons. It's kind of a bit irritating in my opinion, and all my best weapons seem to always be machine guns. And bear in mind, I am max level in this beta, so I've seen quite a few good drops. As far as I'm concerned, I've played the Devil's Lair about 4 times. That's the hardest dungeon available in the beta as of yet. But the actual way in which you pick up guns also really, really frustrates me. It just gets under my skin because in Borderlands, you might not like Borderlands, I know it's a very love-hate game, but one of the things it really does well is it makes the gear that you pick up feel like popcorn. It makes you want to come back on the game. It makes you want to pick up more, because every time you defeat a boss or you defeat a powerful enemy, even the smaller enemies, the amount of gear that just pops out at random is absolutely astronomical, and the differentiation in the gear is pretty darn impressive as well. And, you know, when I defeat a boss on this team, I'm sat there waiting like, oh, what's going to come out? You know, I'm about to defeat this boss. We've spent ages defeating it. And then right at the end, you're waiting for the drop. And what do you get? You get like maybe heavy weapon ammo and normal weapon ammo and a bit of supercharge. And it's like, really? Like, you know, considering the bosses themselves are extremely grindy, they need to kind of have a light at the end of the tunnel. They need to have a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. If you're going to go on this massive journey of like, oh, I'm going to kill this bad guy, I'm going to shoot him from this angle, shoot him from this angle, shoot him from this angle, and it can last about like 10 minutes, like, honestly. Like, maybe if you're playing a bit slow, it can go quicker than that if you like optimize your run and you're avoiding trouble and you're not having to revive your teammates, but they definitely can last up to 10 minutes, as you would expect in MMOs. You know, a lot of the time you see games like World of Warcraft where they have to take down this massive boss and it takes absolutely ages. This kind of ties into my other problem, is in the fact that it takes a long time, but it doesn't necessarily take a long time for the right reason. It's a lot about bullet sponginess in the bosses. It's a lot about shooting them from a distance, avoiding their damage, and then getting back into position and shooting them. I think the game would be a lot better if it concentrated on making more boss animations and more boss, like a more in-depth and, you know, complicated moveset, more so than the fact that them just having a ton of health. In the first boss, I think the first boss is okay. I think maybe a little bit less health and maybe one or two more movement options, or one or two more, you know, patterns, because the pattern is extremely easy to figure out in these bosses, to be quite honest. I think the lower level enemies are fine for the most part, because they haven't got that much health and they've got very interesting movement options. A lot of the time you see enemies that are invisible and carry swords, and you've got to be very careful, a little bit like the Elite in Combat Evolved and Halo 2, etc., the campaigns, where you've got invisible swords and you've got to make sure you watch out for them. And then you get enemies that are more like the Flood, that play extremely aggressive and less tactical and run at you. And when they're all combined together, because there's so many like enemies in a group and they're all quite easy to kill, it can become quite overwhelming. That's when it's satisfying. When it becomes getting on and trying to find an angle on a boss and playing fairly defensive whilst doing so, I just disagree. I just don't see the fun aspects of it, and it's a real shame, because the boss design is absolutely fantastic. The animations look really impressive, and I love the way they look aesthetically, and I think they look really imposing, really daunting to fight. But then when you actually get into the fight and you learn the routine of what's actually going on, it's kind of like you see through the smoke and mirrors, and you're like, oh, okay, so that's what actually happens when I fight a boss. I just kind of have to stand on this side. If you watch my boss playthroughs, you'll see that I'm just playing pretty darn defensive, to be honest. The second boss is worse than the first boss, in my opinion. It looks absolutely amazing. It looks like this giant 343 Guilty Spark Forge Ball. Something about Bungie, they have an obsession with orbs for some reason. They have an orb fetish. I'm not really sure why. But it looks incredible, and it acts incredible. The animations look beautiful. It's a stunning like boss to fight, to be honest. And then it's so frustrating because it does barely any damage to you, and its main strength is the fact that it does a ton of damage. With the second boss, even if one of the players on your team gets killed, it's extremely unlikely that they're going to get killed. They usually get killed if they get taken by surprise randomly, and B, the chances of them getting taken by surprise twice in a row is incredibly, like, unlikely. It never happened to us. We haven't lost to the second boss. The first boss, we were taken by surprise at first. We were like, oh my god, like, this boss is huge. I don't know what to do. We were getting shot by the turret, but then once we worked out the routine, it also became a matter of, we're probably not going to die unless we do something really, really dumb. And that's not a matter of gear, I don't think, because it's a very high-level boss. I think they should just work on it doing, you know, maybe having, instead of free options, it maybe has, like, free options. It has, like, use a turret, use a laser-guided turret, and throw grenades. Instead of that, maybe work on it, like, having teleport abilities, maybe work on it, like going into the air and having a hover mode section, and just being slightly more unpredictable, because the fact of the matter is, we're going to be playing these bosses for quite some time. You know, players have to grind, players have to try and get the equipment, players have to, you know, constantly attack this certain mission. They've got to prepare for the fact that players are going to be doing these missions multiple times, and if so, they have to be a tiny bit more enjoyable and fun to do. Like I said, this turret for main bad guy is much better, because you also get to shoot at its legs. Its legs are its weak point, and then it goes down and it's crippled, and then you shoot the core of it, which was quite an interesting gameplay mechanic. And then you had to get out in time, because when you do get close to the turret guy, it starts popping out grenades, and you've got to be very cautious of that. But overall, the PvE experience has a huge amount of potential, and in a lot of ways it was more satisfying than I thought it would be. I really enjoy the battles against the lower level enemies. I think the bosses just need a little bit of work. In all honesty, I think the weapons need a little bit more tuning to make them more exciting, and I don't understand why they're not going with the vibe of there's going to be a ton of weapons. You know, if there's going to be less weapons, I expect them to be more interesting, and in this beta, that's not necessarily the truth, in my honest opinion. I don't think, like, a lot of the weapons, I've picked up at least 6 weapons so far where I've gone, you know, this weapon isn't bad, but it is incredibly dull and uninspired to use, and they don't seem to play around too much with the elemental attribute, which is something which just seems like a bit of an oversight, in my honest opinion. For the end of this video, I'm going to talk about PvP for a tiny bit and just give you guys my first impressions of that. I don't have any PvP gameplay, unfortunately. All my PvP gameplay has kind of sucked because I'm just getting the hang of it, and I don't necessarily fully understand, which is why I don't want to go into too much detail. But to be honest, my first impressions is that it's a little bit of fun. It kind of depends on what lobby you get into, because some of the maps are just, I think they're kind of badly designed. That's all I can say. I think, like, they look beautiful. Once again, the aesthetics are incredible. Bungie never fail in that department. It's gorgeous to look at, to say the least. And the only problem is like, one of these areas just looks like it was designed more for fun than it was for any sort of competitive viability whatsoever. And I'm not exactly a competitive whore myself, but I look at the player base and I say to myself, okay, these guys on the beta I'm playing right now aren't that scumbaggy, but if you bring in the Call of Duty community, they are going to have a freaking field day. The amount of corners, the amount of nooks and crannies, the amount of dead ends, the amount of pointless twists and turns seems absolutely ridiculous to me. Then you combine that with the fact that you've got these, you can bring in these super abilities and the randomness of weapons brought in from the single player campaign, and it feels like sometimes you can just walk around a corner and you are dead. Like, sometimes, literally, that has happened to me more times than I can count. I've walked around a corner and someone randomly has their supercharged ability, their super ability charged. Now, I don't necessarily know if they're going to have, like, what I would do if I was creating this game is I'd have those modes, and they're more on the casual side of things, and that's totally fine, more like a social matchmaking from Halo 3, but then vice versa, you also have this mode where it's a little bit more, like, I'd say loadout defined, where you have, like, this is a really good assault rifle class from the using resources from the campaign. It's got, like, an assault rifle from the second mission. It's pretty darn good, and everyone can choose from that one, or they can choose a really good default sniper. And then there's these classes, and you still get the abilities, but it's a little bit more defined, and there's less, like, randomness to it. Because otherwise, I don't see it having depth. I don't see it having long-term longevity success. You know, I just don't see it happening, and I want it to. You know, there's definitely potential there. The game is beautiful, the way in which the maps look, and some areas of the map are really well designed. It's just some of them are just like open wastelands of pointlessness. And then the vehicles themselves, can I talk about vehicles? They friggin' annoy me, to say the least. Like, vehicles, okay, Bungie have refused to use the board ability for vehicles in this game, whereas I feel like it's a mechanic that would fit in so well into this game. And once again, you know, people are going to say, oh, all this kid wants is like a Halo successor, etc., but I don't know, I want the boarding mechanic to be in every freaking game. It was perfect. Like, it's the one counter to a vehicle. It's like, hey, you know, vehicles are pretty darn good, they're pretty darn impressive, but they have this massive counter to them in the fact that if they start getting greedy, if they start pushing too hard, you can counter them. There's a vehicle on Destiny multiplayer that is just, I can't remember the name of it, but it is disturbingly powerful. It can do a huge amount of damage, and it is incredibly satisfying to use. Like, it's an amazing vehicle. Like, the way you boost, the actual, like, particle effects, and the feeling that happens in your controller, it just feels perfect. It's so intuitive, and it's so easy to drive, and the second I got into that vehicle, I knew exactly what to do, and that's perfect. But at the same time, I think, like, you know, I was abusing it sometimes. I was going in and I was spawn camping with people with it, and it was reminding me of the Mantis from Halo 4, and it was just getting a little bit ridiculous, and there was just so few counters. Another problem you get is, like, you might say, oh, what about Battlefield 4 when you have, like, the helicopters and stuff? They're pretty darn good, and the jets. But the thing is, you can equip counters in your loadout to that. You can equip counters like the, you can equip counters like the rocket RPG, you can put that in your class, you can put, like, homing rockets, etc. You can't really do that in Destiny. What you can do, and this is another counter to my argument, is you've got the heavy ammo that spawns on the maps, and maybe you can use that, and that's like a little bit better at shooting down people. And the heavy ammo can also give you ammo for a rocket launcher if you equip that pre-game. But the thing is, I don't really like the idea of the ammo that drops in, because it seems fairly random. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but like it seems to randomly spawn on one side of the map, randomly spawn on the opposite. And I could be completely wrong. Remember, this is beta, and I've very, very like minorly played the PvP. I haven't played it that much, so it might be different, and it might be the fact that like you can actually you can predict when it's going to spawn each time. I'm not necessarily sure, but that's just something that's been under my skin a little bit. So overall, I'll finish the video now, because otherwise this is going to go on too long. It's already gone on too long. I didn't intend for it to go this far, and I kind of rambled a little bit. But I plan on doing more videos on this. I plan on getting a better understanding of the game's mechanics, so I don't just ramble like a nutter. But overall, it could be good. It could be great, but it needs a little bit of work in some areas. More areas than I've described. And likewise, I'm probably going to go over more videos on this game, because it's a very complex game with very in-depth mechanics. But there's a lot I like, a lot I don't like, and I hope the stuff I don't like is rectified in the future. It very easily could be. This is a beta, it's a very small portion of the game, and I think it's like less than 10% of the actual game, so we'll see. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I've been Modest Major. Peace.